Welcome back. You're listening to the panel discussion, Mitigating Mainframe Cybersecurity Blind Spots Through Modernization, sponsored by Micro Focus Government Solutions on Federal News Radio, part of the Federal News Network. I'm your host, Jason Miller. My guest today, Kevin Hansen, the Chief Technology Officer for Micro Focus Government Solutions, Jason Martin, the Vice Director of the Development and Business Center at the Defense Information Systems Agency, Jason Gray, the CIO at the Department of Education, Ryan Cody, the CIO at the Department of Transportation, and Steve Stewart, the Chief Technology Officer for Stadia. Before break, Ryan brought up this idea of risk, and I think managing risk is probably the biggest issue challenge, biggest area that agencies have to focus on. So let me turn to Jason Gray from Education. When you guys start looking at risks and kind of balancing the risks, how do you find that right balance between risk, security, convenience? Because your mission folks say, give it to me now, I want the capabilities, while your security folks may say, slow down, we have to make sure we get this right. How do you find that balance?
So obviously it's making sure you understand what is your risk profile for all of your systems and the business risk as well, so it's not just about a system risk. We have, and I know I've talked about this before, established a cybersecurity risk scorecard that goes through each of our systems and, from either a plan of action and milestones and where are they at associated with the risk. We also, which again is aligned directly within a cybersecurity framework. So in a moment's notice, I can see what is the cybersecurity posture of that system. That has turned into a beautiful scorecard that I would say about almost 2 years ago I briefed the secretary on, and her comment was, I see a lot, I would like to see a lot more green and blue versus red and yellow. And I'm happy to say that literally in the last few months we've actually had all blue and green, but that gives, so that's one aspect of it. There's also the business risk. There are certainly certain systems from a high value asset standpoint which influences where do we dedicate and focus our attention and our resources, because resources are limited. We also make sure that it's aligned with our modernization plan, so that sometimes a decision that maybe it looks like a less important decision right now, but later on it'll be pay a much larger dividend. So we're kind of looking across the board. The other thing just to add is the support to overcome the risks and communicating to senior leadership. I know Ryan had talked about the Secretary of Transportation, the Secretary of Education, Secretary DeVos has been absolutely supportive of everything from a modernization and a risk management and cybersecurity. So when I brief those issues, it's from a modernization standpoint, it's like, yeah, that's great. You want to get down to 100 less systems. Can we go to even less systems? Can we make them more secure? And that has been instrumental to our ability to literally transform the department in the last 7 months.
Well, first of all, congratulations on getting into blue and green across your scoreboard. I'm not sure what blue means. We know it. We're used to the stoplight system. Hopefully blue is that closer to green?
So one is low risk and the other is that you've met all the objectives. It's never going to be perfect, but it's green is where you want to get, meaning that all of your objectives have been met as it relates to securing the system.
All right, you threw me off a little blue there. Never know what it means. All right, well, thanks for that. Let me turn to Jason Martin as well from DISA. You guys have maybe a tougher job to balance that security and convenience challenge because, again, you have to support warfighters to the tactical edge where everything is about convenience. Security is very, very important, but I need this now, not when the CISO says, okay, all the T's are crossed and I's are dotted.
Right. It's a great question. It's exactly what we're doing now is, as a service provider, we have another significant challenge in that we do need to think about the enterprise and then how it impacts the downstream warfighter on the ground in theater, whatever the case may be. So what we do from how we handle the challenge problem is, again, what are the priorities, but also as a provider, how do we get that enterprise capability out quicker? So how do we then internally look at the solution itself that's coming? How do we manage the critical risk, the critical threats? How do we bake that in from the beginning to then provide that at a higher level, which will then filter down to the warfighter and the tactical units?
That speed is so important, not just for DoD, but I think for any agency, whether you're civilian or DoD. Kevin, jump in a little bit and talk about that speed. Is that a driving factor of getting, or the best argument to get people off mainframes?
Well, not necessarily.
Not necessarily. That's okay too, right?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of other drivers. So specific to mainframes, you can't just think of it as an application or a system. There's infrastructure, there's identity management, there's connectivity, there's the network that supports that, and then you have processes like DevOps, securing the processes that are around the application, and then you have the actual application itself. So there's a pragmatic approach, usually tied to risks and costs that prioritize that shift. And I think, as we've talked about, you take an assessment of your environment. You kind of have a profile of where the risk is and your high value assets. And then, you can start accelerating, the reduction of risk. Some of that's going to involve moving, older applications off the mainframe, or maybe some older DevOps processes, or some infrastructure, some identity management or some identity governance, more in line with what the enterprise is doing.
Steve?
Kind of like following that theme is listen to everybody here. They're actually doing portfolio rationalization. What do I need to do and tackle that? And the last great application portfolio rationalization was Y2K. That's 20 years ago, right? Because we were forced to identify where the data fields are going to be impacted. We have another similar Y2K right now, and that large groups of labor is going to be retiring that are maintaining these older applications. So you need, again, rationalize which ones make sense, which ones are higher risk, and doing that kind of put them in order as to what to tackle first.
Under the Obama administration, the Office of Management Budget pushed a portfolio stat approach, and I think that had some success, probably not as much as the Y2K one, because that was a more hard deadline. Versus, hey guys, this is just a good idea. But part of that rationalization is this that inventory of understanding what you have. And I guess just to play off what Jason Martin said around what kind of DISA is viewing is the speed piece. If you can get applications and systems to the cloud, use the DevOps as Kevin mentioned, then you can kind of add that speed to that delivery of services. I guess that's where I was going as a driver.
Yeah,
I mean, cost and security and all those things are important, but now with all this, like, hey, what about Netflix? We have to be more like Netflix, right? Which
right.
I don't know, I personally hate that, but I'll just repeat it a lot. Steve?
No, yeah, what I would say is that, the velocity, because if you're able to rapidly exit off the mainframe to an existing framework, the cloud is kind of like a new mainframe. It's like a lot of mainframe components. We're talking about client server early on. We've done full circle. Right. We started with the original cloud, which is the mainframe, gone to client server, and now we're back to the same centralized thing. So we've done full circle, and there's a lot of mainframe qualities within the cloud because they need to have high availability. But there is, when you migrate these applications, you're going to be testing and validating using DevOps. You could do some of these new testing tools that do AI with testing, model-based testing, things like that, and that'll give you the agility, and then leverage into containers and Kubernetes and all the tools that exist within the cloud.
All right. If we were playing Buzzword Bingo, I think you would get them all. Ryan, jump in, because the other part of this discussion of when we talk risks and we talk about challenges is making sure that you're changing the culture within your agency. You're dealing with workforce issues. That's probably your biggest challenge, because you're centralizing all your IT from an organization that hasn't been centralized before.
Right. Yeah, it's perhaps the biggest challenge we face is sort of redefining the culture and getting buy-in. And we have a lot of competing priorities, right? We have our mission status quo today, where we try to keep American people safe on the roads and in the air and on the water, and those are all super important. And then we have all the new emerging technologies in transportation. We have drones and UASs, and we have Hyperloop, and we have connected vehicles and autonomous vehicles, and just the transportation sector is moving at the speed of light, and all of these things are pulling at us to sort of give them direction and guidance and regulation and safety. So we have a lot of competing priorities, and yeah, it all comes back to culture and the risk there. We have a workforce, like you mentioned, that's aging, and it's the same in the federal workspace. We have many people that are ready to retire. We compete with the private sector in an unfair footing many times in terms of salary and things. We compete for the same jobs, and so there's a lot of risks with trying to get there. And what we're trying to focus on really is to create a coalition of the willing, if you will, or an army of the willing, right? Focus on those who are ready to do this, who have buy-in, who are excited about the future of a centralized model, and bring the supporters on board and energize them and get them moving, and sort of sideline the naysayers and say, hey, we're off and running. You can join the team or you can sit on the sidelines, but we're doing this. That's been our approach.
Jason?
Well, I'm excited about what Brian said. I think the last time we spoke, Jason, I talked about the same thing. I'm really proud of DISA and what they've done from a recruiting perspective. We are really out there on the road, working with schools, learning from the intelligence community, learning from other parts of the department on how best to recruit and retain personnel. It's exciting to hear the federal government is at large. I do believe we have some of the best and brightest in the country, to solve our nation's problems. And I'm really energized by what we are trying to do as an agency and how I think that'll permeate across the department.
Kevin, as you guys talk with your government clients and the challenge of culture change, if someone's been working on a mainframe for years, hey, but this is my mainframe, I can see the blinking lights, right? It's the old. How big of a challenge is that to get people to kind of give up control, if you will?
Yeah, it could certainly be a challenge. I think Steve alluded to it earlier. There's a pass the baton moment that's happening. And I think it's a matter of energizing the folks that are responsible for those systems around the new capabilities that they could integrate and take advantage of. From a cyber standpoint, I think the introduction of AI and automation is a real game changer. I think it's going to allow us to be much more proactive than reactive, and those are things that all these individuals with these very specialized skills can help enable for the agency. So, it's an opportunity, really.
And I think you make a great point, because the administration has talked a lot about the need to kind of upskill, reskill the workforce, and to get outside of, hey, you don't need to watch those blinking lights. Let Micro Focus, the Government Solutions, do it, or somebody else do it. You can really kind of move into that data world. Jason, I know you've spent a lot of time with the CIO Council, so maybe we could put on your other hat there for a second.
Would love to. So I have two comments. One, from a cultural standpoint, that is certainly a challenge that all agencies face. The key there, of course, is leadership support, but also building a really strong team. I know I'm extremely proud of the team I have at Education, because that is enabling me to help, as an organization, change the culture so that we can modernize and move the agency forward. So we have that piece, and again, it's a lot about communication of what we're doing, why we're trying to do it, what's in it for the individual that we're talking to. So there's that piece from a cultural standpoint. The other piece that's been talked about quite a bit is about the aging workforce. One of the things, as a co-chair on the CIO Council Workforce Committee, that we have done, and we actually just had our second cohort graduation from a cyber reskilling academy, is the first cohort was focused on bringing in individuals who had the aptitude or the propensity to be successful from a technical standpoint, but were non-IT professionals, and training them through a several-month program to do cybersecurity skills or activities. And that was really, really good. We weren't really sure what we were going to get, but we had over 1,500 people apply, so we know the need was there. And it was really about reskilling the existing workforce, not finding ways to get rid of people. It was finding ways to repurpose and reskill them so that we could, because to Jason's point, there's a lot of really, really talented people there. And if you have someone who's been doing, acquisitions or budgeting, and then you weave them into cybersecurity or any other field, they just bring all that wealth of knowledge with them.
I had a great conversation with another CIO just in the last couple of weeks, and they talked about they had one day where they did a cloud stand-down day, where they stopped what everyone was doing just for that day and did training, and not just in the CIO's office, but acquisition and HR, because everyone kind of has to know around where that is happening, where is it going, and of course at different levels. Ryan, is there anything that you guys at Transportation are doing around that workforce training, around that piece to get people ready for this, if you will, reskill, upskill, change, and how your processes, how's your technology working?
Yes, we have a number of initiatives we have launched or about to launch about retraining, reskilling our workforce. We're offering opportunities like Jason Education for a change of career path. If you want to move into cyber in particular, that's a big one. We are hoping to launch very soon here a IT-focused talent acquisition program where we partner with local high schools even and colleges to get down to the levels where we need to begin to develop workforce as they bring them into transportation. And we're offering any number of programs we can available, through the government to encourage the people there to find what they love to do and become passionate about it and then execute. As part of, again, the move to shared services, inevitably people's jobs will change. And as we modernize applications too and get away from the older systems, people's jobs will have to change. And we've said to everyone all along, no one's losing their job, everyone's keeping their job, but you have to find where you fit and find what you love to do, whatever you're passionate about, and we will help you in every way to get skilled or trained and become the very best you can be in that role.
Kevin or Steve, jump in here on this, on a little bit on this, because you guys also have to find people that you have to hire. I mean, this is a government problem, but there's not like everyone needs a lawyer, right? I guess maybe we all do to some extent.
There's too many lawyers.
But there's a lot of lawyers. But how are you guys dealing with the same workforce challenges? Maybe Steve?
Yeah, I mean, there's a psychology to this, right? Because if we advocate over communication, let everybody. This is where we're going to go. This is the objective. Team composition is definitely key. All my battle scars have been bad team compositions, right? So if everybody knows what the mission is, and this is where we're going to go, is going to be working out pretty well. We attack it as a blended approach. There's a core group of folks that are willing to learn and willing to do things. There's also legacy building. I wrote this application for 30 years. I'm going to pass this on to continue on. If you explain to them, you have a great application, it's been working really well, and you're not going to be here for the next 30 years. You want this thing, how are you going to transition that over? So work towards that. But we're also bringing in other workforce, Java and C# developers that understand the new world and then teach them the COBOL with the new tools that Micro Focus has. And that's the blend that we've been using to tackle this.
All right, well, let's take a quick break. You're listening to the panel discussion, Mitigating Mainframe Cybersecurity Blind Spots Through Modernization, sponsored by Micro Focus Government Solutions on Federal News Radio, part of the Federal News Network.